Hello, my friends. Thad Riley here, episode number 317 of the Thadcast. Hey, you took time out of your day to hang with me. Thank you for that. And today is December 1st. Yes, it is. It is, for me, it feels like that day where we kind of usher in that new vibe, that vibe of Christmas, that vibe of the celebration of Jesus. And maybe, Christmas is this word that has all this heaviness or connotations to it in some ways. Maybe for you, it's like, I didn't get the decorations as good as last year. We've got all this work to do, presents, and how am I going to coordinate with COVID and all these different things. Christmas is a reflection of one of the greatest moments in the history of mankind, the arrival, the birth of God's only Son, Jesus Christ, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. And he made a big deal, the scriptures make a big deal about this moment in our history. And why do they do that? Why do they dedicate so much space and intensity? Because they want us to just connect with Jesus. I think that's the whole purpose. This is another path for you and I to connect with Jesus, to understand more about Jesus. So I wrote this book about 3 or 4 years ago called 25 Days with Jesus. And it's a Christmas devotional. And the purpose of the book was to just take each day of December and give us something in our hearts to kind of manifest and simmer in the love of God and what Jesus' birth really means to each of us individually. So I love Christmas. If you know me, you know that Christmas is just my gig every single year. My poor wife, my poor kids, probably playing Christmas music when she gets off work today. What do you think? I don't know. We'll see how that goes, right? And she's no Scrooge. She loves it too, so it's all good. Anyway, we're going to do a little bit today from the first chapter of the book. And I don't know if this will be a continuing theme. I have a gut feeling you're going to hear a lot more of this in the month of December, because I think we could bring a little bit of this book and this Christmas devotional out to you here on the Thadcast. Now, a quick note on all of this before we get rolling into the content part. So I've started a new Facebook group for my devotional 25 Days with Jesus, which you can get on Amazon in paperback or on Kindle. If you get the Kindle version, you can jump in there with us today. Let me know, and I will make sure that you get added to the book. But it's an open group. If you type in on Facebook, search 25 Days with Jesus, this group will pop up, answer a few questions, and you're in. And it's golden. I may have to approve you, but I will approve y'all. Okay? So there's no drama. Just jump on in, join the group. And if your paperback's coming in a couple days, go ahead and join us now, and we'll get you all taken care of. Okay? And you can catch up in a couple of days when it comes. So what I want to talk about today is chapter 1, because it really hit me. And it's funny, as the writer, you're reading it years later and you're like, oh, well, that's okay. But the content is what matters. And I think when I think about Christmas and I think about our world, like I mentioned earlier, I'm thinking about things like Amazon, right? I'm thinking about bringing all the family together. I'm thinking about how I can turn this into something, right? And I shouldn't be thinking how I can, but how God's going to use this moment of Christmas in my family's life to empower us spiritually to grow closer to God. And so that was a lot of the purpose of the book anyway, was what I said in that last sentence. And I think I've iterated that enough today. So in the first chapter of this book, what I wanted to do was give a little context of what was going on in the history of the world. So let's answer that question. What was going on in the history of the world? Well, it was probably one of the darkest political climates you could ever imagine. And why was it so dark? Well, first of all, Israel is not so long out of the occupation of other countries. Now, there's been some quiet, there's been some peace for a couple hundred years, I think about 400 years, but Babylon's gone, and Israel is Israel. However, there is this growing army to the west, the Roman army, and they are starting to make their way into Israel, and over the next 30 years, you will see them actually take over Israel. In the meantime, you've got King Herod there. Now, King Herod was a genocidal maniac. That's the small way to put it. And there'll be another chapter about him. We can dig into him a little bit more. But a couple of things about King Herod. The story goes, he loved one of his wives so much that he just had her killed because of his love. He drowned 2 of his sons. This is an evil guy. He ordered the execution of any boy, any child 2 years old and under during the time of Jesus' birth, because he had gotten word from the wise men that they were there to pursue finding Jesus. I mean, this is a guy that is your king, that is, I mean, you don't want to talk about a dark rule. King Herod had a dark rule. Unlike anything we know here in America. We use this word dark, by the way, and we shouldn't be using this word. We shouldn't be using this word because we don't know it. We don't know it. Politicians are using this word and they're saying it's going to be a dark winter. Guys, we don't know it, because in our dark winter, we're going to have a lot of lights on in our house. And we're probably going to have some Christmas lights up and maybe a tree. And we're going to be reading on our Kindles about the story of Jesus and reading our Bibles, and we're going to be together and we're going to have heat. We're probably not going to worry too much about where our next meal is going to come from. I mean, we're concerned, obviously, about this pandemic. We're very concerned about staying safe, wearing masks, doing the right thing to honor our neighbors, and to also not bring a virus that's very, very difficult to deal with into our homes. All of these things make complete sense. However, in the history of the world, the way that we have structured our lives and live our lives, and the gift of technology in our lives today, I don't know if you and I are going to be experiencing a dark winter, such as what was going on in this time of Jesus' birth. In fact, so much so, there's a census going on, and Mary and Joseph don't have a choice but to be on the road. And they are on the road heading to Bethlehem at this time. Now, what is the season? Well, it was probably in late March, early April, and it was a rainy season. It was the rainy season there in Israel. So imagine you're traveling. They don't have umbrellas. You have the best, whatever kind of cloaks you can put over your head, and Mary's maybe riding a donkey part way, and maybe not. But it is pouring rain. It is the rainy season in Israel. It's not flat ground. They're going through the hills. There's a good chance that these trails and roads they were walking on were packed. Why were they packed with people? Well, they'd already built these trails and roads, right, to get to and fro. But now everybody has to travel because they've got to get home for the census. That was what the king wanted, a census. You have to go be part of the census. And so these roads are packed. It's raining. It's gross. You're under the rule of King Herod at this time, and you don't know what's going to happen next, but the genocide of baby boys is happening, and you know you're about to give birth to a baby boy. This is an incredible moment in history for the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, Jesus Christ, to be born. I mean, think about it. There's no hospital. There's no technology or medical care. There's not even like a bed or anything warm. I mean, it's a barn. It's not great. But they were at this inn, they had this place, and it just was what it was. But everything in their world, the culture had gone nuts, completely nuts. Here's what's interesting, I think, about the devotional today that hit me when I was reading it at the end. Hebrews 4:15. And this is to answer the question. And what's the question? Why did God send Jesus to us in this moment of history, right like this? Why would he pick this moment? And I think Hebrews 4:15 gives us some light. We do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses. This is the start of Jesus' existence on this earth, his life as a human. This is the beginning. This is how he enters into the world in the most humble way possible at maybe one of the darkest times in the history of the world. And this is Jesus' entrance to the world at this moment. And we wonder sometimes if God understands what we're dealing with and what we're going through. I think Jesus understood this better than anyone else possibly could. And I think every specific historical moment in this context matters so much of his life matters because it reflects a God who loves us and doesn't want us ever to feel like we are hung out to dry, that we are alone and he can't understand. I believe this is exactly why he sent his son in such humble circumstances, so we in our humble circumstances can understand the empathy that Jesus would have for us. We do not have a God. We do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses. And I don't know about you, but I woke up today with weaknesses. Like when I read that verse, it hit me like the tears, like I literally got absolutely choked up reading this verse because it hit me so hard about God's ability to understand me, to understand our world right now. We do not serve a motivational warrior God who is sitting there screaming at us to tie up our boots and get moving. We serve a God who meets us just as we are and not as we should be, because you and I will never be as we should be, by the way, until we're with Jesus. So that's kind of a quote from Brendan Manning, but I add to it, make it a little more Jesus-centered. So what about this today? What about this? Does it not ignite a fire in your soul to understand God's deep love for us, to create a path for his son to be born in such humble circumstances? So even if somehow this ends up being a darker winter than we've ever imagined, Jesus can understand it. God empathizes with us. And he is the one that we can count on to go to connect deeply, and to fill us spiritually with all of his goodness. He sent his son specifically for each of us as individuals, all of mankind, to come to him, to fall on their knees before him and praise him for his goodness, because he is worthy of it today. My hope is today for each of us on December 1st, we will begin to evolve out of this state that we have been in for months, maybe a year. And we will look to the story of the birth of Jesus, of Christmas, in a new way. And we will embrace it for ourselves and for our families and for our friends, that will strike up conversations about it and will be filled by the goodness of God in the story of the birth of Jesus for 25 days. So we'll be talking about this. We'll be talking about this because I don't think there's any better subject than Jesus to be talking about here on the Thadcast. And I hope you'll join me and stay with me here with the podcast, of course, but also in the 2 Facebook groups that we have going right now. So get the book today. Jump in 25 Days with Jesus devotional. It's only $5.99, I think, for the Kindle, and $9.99 for the paperback. That's it. Order them today. Jump in with us there. And by the way, if you haven't joined us in the Thadcast Facebook group, you're automatically approved. Go ahead and join that today. We would love to have you be part of that. Give feedback, connect with me there. Love to hear more about your story as and talk more about the podcast, each episode, ideas and thoughts, all that good stuff. So those are 2 Facebook groups that I'd love for you to be part of. What I'd love for you to be part of more than anything else, though, is the story of Jesus. That would be number 1. And to bring him into your heart today and connect with him deeply in ways that you haven't connected with him before, because he loves you so very much. And he is such a good God. He is so good. He is so very good to us. Well, anyway, that's it. That's it for episode number 317 of the Thadcast. As always, if you have comments or questions, shoot them at me. I'd love to hear from you. And of course, if you could do a rating or review on iTunes, that helps me more than you could guess. And then finally, in closing, if you share this podcast on social media or share it with a friend, that is also super, super helpful as well. But we're doing this thing regardless of what happens. We just keep going here, right? We're on 317 episodes, so who knows? Anyway, thank you for taking time out of your day to join me today. And until next time, my dear friends, may you be blessed.